Representative Deanne Mazzochi, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel on what is a very important news day as we are sitting here on the 19th of November. On the 18th, just the night before, at about 6 o'clock, the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois handed down 4 indictments of individuals all associated in one form or another with Speaker Madigan. And there are allegations within the indictment that there was a quid pro quo agreement between these 4 individuals who were indicted and the Speaker's office. Right before we start, let me just tell the audience you are on a Special Investigative Committee, one of 3 Republicans on that committee, and we're going to be talking to you about that and get your thoughts of this breaking news story. But first, let me, if I might, before I get your comment, let me just bring up, to be fair, a statement the Speaker issued earlier today. The indictment returned Wednesday does not allege any criminal misconduct on my part. I have not been accused of or charged with any wrongdoing. Your reaction to this news story that might mean the end of Michael Madigan as the House Speaker, where he has served as the longest serving House Speaker in the history of the United States?
Sure. I think that one of the reasons why you see Speaker Madigan may have been able to stay so in power for so long is because of all of these types of arrangements that he had, certainly with ComEd. You know, what's been admitted to by ComEd is they provided Madigan and his associates with $1.3 million worth of value for the purpose of influencing and rewarding him in his activities and role as Speaker. The indictment that was handed down last night goes into additional detail and provides some crucial information that we believe came from a federal wiretap where previously the Speaker had indicated he had no knowledge and participated in no conversations in connection with these ComEd allegations. Well, now we have an actual allegation by the feds that, in fact, there were communications that were recorded by the feds, and it indicates that Mike Madigan did, in fact, know exactly what was going on, particularly with regard to efforts to get one of his political allies a ComEd board seat to the tune of $78,000 a year. So this, you know, while I admit that Speaker Madigan is not personally indicted in this particular indictment, it does indict the former ComEd CEO, Mike McLean, who has described himself as like a brother to Madigan, 2 additional individuals who have been long associated with Mike Madigan and his political team. So, you know, I don't know how the Speaker walks away from this indictment and thinks that all is sunshine and roses.
Also some issue here of with Chris Welch, who is the chairman of the Special Investigative Committee. And last week, you and the 2 other members, Grant Worley and Tom Demmer, the 3 Republicans, we were talking about the ongoing investigation or lack thereof, where Chris Welch, you and the other Republicans were alleging that he was not holding the hearings on this investigative committee. Why don't you give us your own thoughts on that? And by the way, the Illinois Channel is airing your comments from last week around the state, but I think obviously now they take on a special significance.
Right. I think that what we've been saying all along, and it, you know, we've only met, the Special Investigating Committee has only been allowed to meet twice by Chairman Welch, and we filed, or this complaint was filed back in August of this year. So it's absolutely inexcusable that over the course of 80 plus days, he's only allowed the committee to meet twice. Well, we know that at the last time that we were allowed to meet and actually take in testimony, ComEd gave testimony that was absolutely devastating to the Speaker, confirmed that there was an email where, again, the Speaker has been professing he lacked knowledge on all of these issues, confirmed that, in fact, there was an email that was sent from the Speaker's office manager to ComEd CEO Ann Maggiore, you know, in connection with the trying to get this Madigan political ally onto a ComEd board seat. So we know that there is information out there. And because we are an investigating committee, it's been astounding to me that the Democrats have been so utterly uninterested in actually investigating. And Chris Welch keeps coming up with every excuse under the sun as to why he can't actually show up and do the committee's work. One of the things that I think the committee absolutely needs to do is we need to vote to issue a subpoena for Mike Madigan to come testify before the committee under oath. And, there's all kinds of procedural reasons why we want to do that, why we need to do that. And the fact that Chris Welch keeps ducking and hiding and not allowing us to actually come forward and cast that vote really shows that he's kind of fixing the process for Madigan instead of trying to actually investigate Madigan and get to the bottom of the truth.
If you did subpoena Speaker Madigan as the committee to have him come in and testify and answer, as you say, your questions under oath, does he have the right to deny that, or what happens if he refuses to come in?
Well, see, this is the whole point, is the speaker has only issued a 2.5-page letter, and some of the statements that he's made in the letter have now been contradicted, including by the indictment that was released last night. So it has been our position, the Republicans on the committee at least, that if we want to investigate what was Madigan doing and thinking, and if he is going to offer a denial to some of these allegations, then he needs to come before the committee and actually say what the truth is under oath and be able to confirm it and validate it. But instead, the Democrats on the committee have been preventing us. They've been squelching any opportunity for us to actually try to get that testimony. So they're there to protect the speaker. They're not there to actually investigate. And we find that to be extraordinarily concerning and troubling. Now, in the letter that Madigan provided to the committee, he did not invoke his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. So because of that, if he's not going to exercise his Fifth Amendment rights, there's no reason why he shouldn't come before the committee and testify. He's clearly not going to do it voluntarily. That's why we need to use appropriate process, and that includes a subpoena. This subpoena process is fully contemplated under Mike Madigan's own House rules. So it's very interesting to me that he doesn't want to live up to the rules that he wants all 118 members of the General Assembly to supposedly abide by as well.
Since this news broke last evening, and again, it was roughly in the area of 6 o'clock or so, first of all, give us your reaction, what you thought when you heard this, and to what extent have you had any conversations with other members of the legislature? And I'm kind of curious if you've talked to any Democratic members. What I'm also wondering here is that to what extent is the Speaker losing support within his own caucus? Because he's going to have to, if he wants to stand again, he's going to have to stand for election as the Speaker in January when the new legislature comes in. And I'm just wondering at this point, even if he didn't resign, would he have enough votes to regain his speakership for a new term?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in there. So let me start with, when I read the indictment, obviously, some of the facts I already knew because they were from the ComEd Deferred Prosecution Agreement, but there was additional critical information that I think was disclosed that further validated the premise that Mike Madigan did in fact know what was going on, and which undermined the statements that he had made in his previous letter to the committee that he had nothing to say because he had no knowledge, had no conversations about any of these types of activities. And it further showed that there were all kinds of special favors that were being awarded to Madigan, not only the board seat, some favorite attorneys and politically connected attorney. There were special internship programs for the 13th Ward where he's the committeeman. So, this just starts to give more and more details on all of the bad things that were going on involving ComEd. And so were they a surprise to me? No, because I've been delving into this, but did it illuminate a lot more of the details and contradict what the speaker said? Absolutely. So I think that one of the things that you're now starting to see is a lot of the members of the Democratic House, they have to decide, are they going to support someone who, even if you want to accept the speaker's viewpoint is true, that he somehow, he's supposed to be the most sophisticated political player in all of Illinois, but he didn't know that all of this was going on right under his nose. Even if you want to accept that to be true, it still shows that the culture he has created down in Springfield is one that is leading to allegations of bribery and corruption. That's not exactly ethical conduct. That's not conduct that I think is good for the integrity of the House down in Springfield. So the Democrats really need to make a choice. Are they going to, continue to enable his political power and schemes, or are they finally going to say enough is enough and hopefully get Illinois back on track where they'll actually start focusing on good policy and good government instead of what's the best for the insider class in Illinois?
For those who don't know, the amount of influence that the Speaker holds over the Illinois House of Representatives, and for that matter, the entirety of state government, Can you share just your perception? You're relatively new, but you've been there now for a couple of years. Give us your insights as to what sway he has over the body.
He has ultimate control and sway over the body because of the way in which the House procedural rules have been set up. So that's why it's very important to me when you're talking to Democrats to not just say, who do you support for Speaker, but also what are you going to agree to are the procedural rules that should govern this body? Because the federal government has also pointed out in the ComEd deferred prosecution agreement, in the guilty plea agreement involving Fidel Marquez, a ComEd employee, that it is the procedural rules of the House that give Mike Madigan so much power and influence over what legislation can come to the floor, what legislation can't come to the floor. And it's pretty well known that if the Speaker does not want a piece of legislation on the floor, then it's not going to happen unless, somebody's trying to cut a deal with him in connection with something else. And this is why I think for Illinois, it's been so hard to actually get real reform. Because even if, for example, the Illinois Senate were to pass a bill, and you might even have complete bipartisan support in the House on both the Democrats and the Republican sides of the aisle. But if the Speaker believes it's going to be a threat to his power, he does not have to bring that piece of legislation forward. The Republicans in our last session, we tried to propose a rule that would say, look, if you've got these veto-proof bipartisan majorities on both sides of the aisle who agree this is legislation that we want, that should be, we should be allowed to bypass the Speaker and bring that to the floor for a vote. And every single Democrat voted against having that kind of rule. So they've been enabling the Speaker's power in, it's not as though they haven't had a hand in promoting it and maintaining it. So I really am gratified to start seeing some of the people coming out and saying, well, we don't want to see Mike Madigan as Speaker anymore. But we also need to take care that we're going to start seeing a dismantling of the Madigan rules, because the Madigan rules are also what has allowed Madigan to take on this sort of mythical status of having so much control, and ruling with an iron fist over the Illinois House.
I am reminded of the statement by Governor Rauner when he was in, if you probably recall, when he said, "I am not in charge, I'm trying to get to be in charge," which to me, Governor Rauner was ridiculed for saying that, but it goes to the point that he was in a tough battle with the Speaker, and it goes to show how in his mind, that is Governor Rauner's mind, the Speaker had more power over state government than the governor. And I would say a lot of political observers would agree with that Mike Madigan just controlled it to such an extent that it really didn't matter who was the governor. Nothing was going to get done that he didn't want to have done.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And again, that is built into the House procedural rules. I voted against those rules because I believe that every legislator should have an opportunity to, work with their constituents, bring legislation of importance to not only to the legislature, but actually have the opportunity to get those bills debated and discussed with their colleagues. And the way in which it works with Mike Madigan is under his House rules. Every piece of legislation goes to what's called the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee has a majority of his handpicked legislators on it who, do what he wants them to do, and he trusts them to do what he wants and what he needs. They decide if a bill can even be released to a committee for a hearing. They decide if an amendment can go forward. So, through this and many other ways in which, Madigan controls the committee chairs, he controls the agenda, he controls what can actually come to the floor for a vote. He does have that ironclad control over the General Assembly. So certainly for me, I think as a Republican, as a member of the minority, you do have to try to find Democrat colleagues who will work with you and who like your bills. But there have been bills that I've had, complete bipartisan support for that unanimously passed out of committee, and I still could not get them brought to the House floor because if the Speaker says no, it's not coming.
As of today, did you speak to Chairman Welsh or any of the other Democratic members on the committee? And then apparently Speaker Madigan, from his statement, is saying I haven't done anything wrong. I don't know what proof the U.S. Attorney has or could gather to force the issue, But even if, for the sake of discussion, Speaker Madigan does not become indicted personally, is not prosecuted personally, what's your assessment at this point? Is he so politically damaged that, do you think he can't survive this as Speaker, or will we find that once again he'll be able to garner enough support among the Democratic caucus to be Speaker again?
Right. So I've obviously been very vocal, but for a whole host of reasons, I think the Speaker should resign, even as a just fundamental question of term limits. The man has been there for almost 50 years. I think that's more than enough, and it's actually against what I consider to be the citizen legislator model that we should all try to emulate in government. But what I think is really what I really care about in terms of my role on the Special Investigating Committee is we have a duty to investigate. And when it comes to, did a legislator engage in unethical conduct or conduct on becoming a legislator, you know, the standard in Illinois should not be, well, has the federal government indicted you yet? It really should be, we should be holding ourselves and our fellow legislators to a much higher standard, because if we don't, how can the people of the state of Illinois actually have trust that the work that we're doing down there is for the benefit of them as opposed to for the benefit of a protected insider class? And I think that for so many years in Springfield, it's sad really that people have become so inured to corruption. They assume that it's just, you know, something that happens in Illinois. And, you know, not only when I talk to some of my other legislators on both sides of the aisle, but legislators in other states, you know, they're not this dysfunctional. They are not run this way. And it's not surprising that we have so many people trying to flee Illinois for, you know, better governed states and lower tax states, because they simply don't want to have to deal with all of this kind of corruption going forward. And to me, it's really sad if our next generation, both in the General Assembly as well as members of the public, aren't going to continue to have trust in Springfield. And I would like them to start having trust in Springfield tomorrow, not, you know, 6 months from now, not 2 years from now.
I don't want to put this all on the feet of Speaker Madigan, but it does seem that this has been quite a year, not only for the COVID, but for corruption in Illinois. And we've had a number of indictments, some of those members of the legislature who are indicted, both in the, well, in the Senate. I can think of at least one off the top of my head, but, or two actually. There, you know, the point is, and then we have another, Luis Arroyo, who resigned his House seat after being indicted. It speaks to what others have long observed, a culture of corruption in the state of Illinois, and one can only speculate, is that part and parcel of the Illinois tradition? Because there was certainly corruption before Mike Madigan joined the legislature. But perhaps, just to put a positive spin on this, maybe this will be a case of it's always darkest before the dawn, and this will be a new day. I had just kind of wondered myself, what drives Mike Madigan to want to continue to be the House Speaker, as he is in the upper, I'm not sure of his age now, he's in the area of 77 years old or so.
Yeah, you know, I don't want to speculate as to what are the motivations for Mike Madigan, but I certainly do see, unfortunately, down in Springfield, a lot of people who are attracted to the power of being able to control people, to influence government, to have the power and influence that comes with spending. And I really do think that Springfield, again, our mentality should not be accepting of corruption. Our goal and our aim should be good government that does good work for the people, because we are in a pandemic. We are in a situation where, you know, kids are in crisis because they're not in school and they're suffering from mental health issues. Our seniors are in crisis. You know, our businesses are in crisis. You know, there's a lot of people who actually do need our help, and they need a government that works. And it needs to stop being a government that works for the connected, and it needs to get back to being a government that works for the people. And the more we can, you know, start rooting out this mentality of, you know, people are there to be public masters instead of public servants, the better off we will be in the state of Illinois.
I should have brought up earlier, but the governor, just before we did our interview here, commented on his afternoon update that he said, if the speaker doesn't go before the press and answer all of their questions, that he should resign. So that's the closest the governor has come to saying the Speaker should resign. He certainly, I said, left the impression that there's just too much to ignore. And I would also say, just so you can imagine politically, the tightrope the governor is walking. The Speaker remains the head of the Democratic Party of Illinois. He's the Speaker of the House. I don't know of other states where we had the Speaker of the state anywhere where he also has control of the party machinery as it is in Illinois. So if the Speaker were to leave the office as the Speaker, he'd also leave presumably as the head of the Democratic Party of Illinois. So at the very least, it would be a new day. I'll give you your closing comments, any of your thoughts, and we appreciate you joining us.
Sure. Well, while I'm glad that Governor Pritzker is encouraging Speaker Madigan to go in front of the press and answer questions, what I really would like to see is Speaker Madigan coming before the Special Investigating Committee to answer questions truthfully and under oath, because that's when he will actually have real consequences on the line if he says anything that's false. And that's where we can hopefully really try to get to the bottom of this, because again, I don't want the state of Illinois to have to go through something like this ever again. And if this is something that can happen to a publicly traded company that's, worth billions of dollars, and they even felt coerced into engaging in influence peddling with Speaker Madigan, I don't even want to think about what the little guy is going to be experiencing in terms of trying to deal with Illinois state government. So I think if you want to get our government straightened out, Madigan needs to answer questions, be open, be transparent, be honest, and I think we need new leadership down in Springfield.
We appreciate you joining us. Again, this had just happened last night, so you're one of the key people to comment on this, being a member of the Special Investigative Committee. And Deanne Mazzochi, thank you so much. As this evolves, maybe we can get together again before too long with some kind of an update. But if we don't talk to you before then, I hope you and your family manage to have a great Thanksgiving. And again, we thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it, and I am happy to keep you up and your viewers updated anytime, and hopefully you have a wonderful Thanksgiving as well.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Be safe.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.